Have you ever sat across from someone, maybe during a conversation, a handshake, even a smile, and felt it? That quiet, creeping discomfort, a subtle tightening in your chest, like something was off, but you couldn't explain why. They weren't saying anything wrong. In fact, they were perfectly polite, maybe even charming. But deep inside, something in you whispered, "This isn't safe." It's a strange kind of fear. Not loud, not obvious, just a feeling, a knowing that bypasses logic and lands somewhere deep in your body. Carl Jung, one of the great architects of modern psychology, spent his life studying moments like these, and he came to a startling conclusion. The most dangerous sign in a person isn't always what they say. It's not how they act. It's what they unconsciously radiate, a kind of invisible psychological energy that bypasses your thinking mind and speaks straight to your instincts. He called it the shadow, all the parts of ourselves we deny, reject, or disown. And when someone is so deeply out of touch with their own darkness, their shadow doesn't just stay hidden, it gets projected onto you. What makes this so dangerous? Because it's silent, because it doesn't look like harm. It looks like control. It looks like confidence. Sometimes it even looks like love. But deep down, it leaves you confused, unsteady, unsure of yourself. And here's the catch. Your conscious mind often misses it, but your nervous system doesn't. Your body doesn't. So let me ask you, have you ever walked away from someone who said all the right things, but left you feeling small, anxious, or off-center? That wasn't your imagination. That was your intuition detecting something your logic couldn't name. Carl Jung once said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." And maybe the real danger isn't loud or obvious. Maybe it wears a mask. Maybe it enters gently. And that's exactly why we must learn to recognize it. So in this video, we're going to explore the psychological signals that your conscious mind might miss, but your soul, your body, your deep inner wisdom, they already know. Because once you can name what you feel, you stop doubting yourself and you start trusting the signal. Let's begin. Let's name the unseen, the danger of shadow projection. Have you ever been accused of something you never did? Someone looks at you and sees something dark. They say you're jealous, manipulative, untrustworthy, and you're left blinking, thinking, where is this even coming from? It doesn't matter how calmly you explain, they're convinced. And worse, they might even convince others. Carl Jung called this phenomenon shadow projection. And according to him, it's not just a psychological quirk. It's one of the most dangerous patterns in human relationships. Here's what happens. Each of us carries a shadow, the parts of ourselves we don't want to see. Anger, shame, envy, fear. Instead of confronting these parts, some people push them deep into the unconscious. And then they begin to see those traits in everyone else. So when someone looks at you and says, "You're being controlling," what they may actually be saying is, "I can't face how controlling I feel inside." They're not seeing you. They're seeing a distorted reflection of themselves, one they don't know how to love. And here's what makes it so dangerous. They're not lying. They truly believe it. Their conviction becomes contagious. To outsiders, their certainty sounds like truth. They'll say it with such clarity, such confidence, that even you might start to doubt yourself. This right here is the tragedy of projection. You become the battlefield for someone else's war with themselves. Jung warned us, when someone can't face their inner darkness, they unconsciously look for someone to carry it for them. And often it's the most compassionate, sensitive people who end up being the target because they're open, because they listen, because they don't immediately fight back. So let me ask you, Has anyone ever painted you as the villain in their story, when all you did was show up with love or truth? If so, please know you were never the cause. You were just the canvas. When someone is at war with their shadow, they don't need an enemy. They'll create one. And unless they do the inner work, unless they turn inward instead of pointing fingers, they will continue this cycle over and over with new faces, new relationships, new victims. The next time someone throws a story at you that doesn't fit, pause, breathe, ask yourself, is this about me, or is this a mirror of them? Because once you can name projection for what it is, you stop absorbing it. You stop shrinking for someone else's comfort. And that's the beginning of reclaiming your peace. The perfect mask. When persona replaces the authentic self, have you ever met someone who seemed flawless? They always know exactly what to say. They smile at the right moments. Their posture is perfect. Their words are careful. Their tone, calm, kind, polished. But for some reason, something about them feels off. You can't explain it. But deep down, your body knows. This isn't all of them. Carl Jung had a name for this. He called it the persona, the mask we wear to meet the world. And let's be clear, we all have one. It helps us function, adapt, play roles, stay safe. It's not inherently bad, but Jung warned. The danger begins when we become the mask, when our entire identity fuses with the image we present to others, and we forget what's underneath. And in a world obsessed with image, that's a trap more of us fall into than we realize. Let's take a breath here. Think of someone in your life, or maybe it's been you at times, who is always on, always composed, always agreeable, never messy, never angry, never uncertain. At first, we might admire them, but spend enough time with that kind of perfection, and it starts to feel hollow. There's no real texture, no contradiction, no warmth of true humanity, just performance. Why does that happen? Because when someone over-identifies with their persona, they disconnect from the full spectrum of who they are, especially their shadow. They suppress the parts of themselves that feel too raw, too dark, too inconvenient. The anger, the sadness, the fear, all of it gets buried. But buried doesn't mean gone. And here's where it gets dangerous. The more perfect the mask, the more pressure builds underneath. Marie-Louise von Franz, a close collaborator of Jung, observed this firsthand. Those who appear the most socially flawless often experience the most intense shadow eruptions, breakdowns, outbursts, secret addictions, private despair. Why? Because they've spent so long pretending they've forgotten how to feel. There's a line by the poet Fernando Pessoa that haunts me every time I read it. The danger is not in wearing the mask, but in forgetting that it's a mask. Think about that. It's not the act of playing a role that hurts us. It's when we lose sight of where the role ends and we begin. Social media, corporate culture, even spiritual spaces. They all reward the polished mask. You get likes, promotions, applause, admiration. But inside, if you're not careful, you begin to shrink. You become the version of yourself that people want, not the version that's real. And here's something fascinating. Neuroscience now confirms that our brains, through something called mirror neurons, can detect the tiniest incongruence between someone's expression and their internal state. So when someone says the right thing, but feels something else, your body knows. That's why you feel a strange tension around someone who's too perfect. It's not about judgment, it's about resonance. We don't trust what doesn't feel whole, because at our core, we long for what's real, even when it's messy. Jung didn't just point this out to criticize. He wanted to free us. He believed that reclaiming the self, the whole authentic self, requires us to loosen the grip of the persona, not to tear it off completely, but to remember that we are more than the mask. So how do we begin that journey? Not by becoming raw all at once, not by oversharing or swinging to extremes, but by gently checking in. Ask yourself, when I walk into a room, who do I become? What parts of me feel safe to show? What parts of me have I learned to hide? Not because they're wrong, but because I was afraid they'd be rejected. This is where the work begins, not in adding more to your identity, but in letting go of what no longer serves it. The Taoist sages warned, polish the surface too much, and the substance wears away. In other words, when we spend all our energy perfecting the outside, we lose touch with the soul inside. Jung believed that behind every rigid persona is a deeply repressed shadow, and the more we deny it, the more power it gains. So here's a radical thought. What if we made space for the contradiction, for the part of us that's kind and angry, confident and insecure, brave and tired? Because wholeness isn't about being perfect, it's about being real. Let me leave you with this. Next time you catch yourself performing, pause, take a deep breath, place a hand on your heart, and ask, what part of me is hiding right now? Can I bring it home, not for the world to see, but for me to hold? Because behind the perfect mask, there's a person longing to be seen, not by everyone, just by you. And when you finally see them, all of them, that's when the healing begins. Not in the applause, not in the image, but in the quiet courage to come home to your own truth. When you're no longer you, the danger of archetypal possession. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and felt they weren't quite there? Their body was there. Their voice was steady. Their words, convincing, even powerful, but something deeper, something human was missing. It's like speaking to a statue lit from within, glowing with certainty, but hollow of soul. Carl Jung had a name for this phenomenon. He called it archetypal possession, a moment when a person becomes so fused with an unconscious force, they're no longer truly themselves. They've been overtaken by a pattern far older, far bigger than any one human ego. Let's take a moment to understand what this really means. In Jungian psychology, archetypes are ancient blueprints of the human experience. Themes like the victim, the hero, the savior, the judge, the warrior. They exist in all of us in different proportions, rising and falling based on life's seasons. They are not bad. They're part of what makes us human. But when we identify too strongly with just one, when we become the savior, the warrior, or the perpetual victim, we lose something essential: our flexibility, our reflection, our humanity. You may have met someone like this. They speak with unwavering certainty. They reject nuance. They cannot tolerate disagreement, because disagreement isn't just disagreement. To them, it's an attack on truth itself. They don't think they're giving you their opinion. They believe they're delivering a universal law. There's a chilling clarity in their tone, a fire in the eyes, a magnetism that can captivate, even seduce, the people around them. And that's what makes this so dangerous, because this isn't just a personal delusion. It can spread. Jung observed that people in states of archetypal possession often attract followers. Why? Because their absolute certainty provides a strange comfort. In a chaotic world, there's something seductive about someone who claims to know exactly what's right, what's wrong, who's good, who's evil. But that conviction is not the same as wisdom. It's not grounded. It's not integrated. It's often the ego trying to inflate itself by clinging to a grander identity. The German mystic Meister Eckhart once warned, The most dangerous spiritual state is believing yourself to be God. And Zen masters have long spoken of Zen sickness, a distortion that arises when someone confuses awakening with superiority. In Sufism, it's called the veil of light, more dangerous than the veil of darkness because it masquerades as purity while separating you from truth. Let's bring this down to something practical. How do you know when someone is caught in archetypal possession? You'll notice they speak in absolutes. They rarely, if ever, say, "I don't know." They don't reflect. They proclaim. Any criticism feels like blasphemy to them. Any boundary, a betrayal, any difference, a threat, and perhaps the most unsettling thing of all, you'll feel like you're not speaking to a person anymore. You're interacting with an idea wrapped in skin. As Jungian analyst Robert Moore put it, you are no longer relating to a whole human personality, but to an archetypal fragment that has hijacked the self. Now let's be clear, this isn't about labeling people. It's not about judging or diagnosing. It's about recognizing when someone, maybe even ourselves, has stopped being and started performing a role so completely that they've forgotten their original face. The stakes are high because when someone is possessed by an archetype, their actions can swing to extremes. They may begin with noble intentions to heal, to guide, to protect, but without reflection, those same intentions can turn fanatical. Compassion becomes control. Protection becomes aggression. Spirituality becomes superiority. In the tragedy, they won't see it happening. They won't question their motives because in their eyes, they're not just right. They are righteousness. This is where we lose the ability to self-reflect. And that, Jung said, is the true death of our humanity. Let me ask you this. Have you ever caught yourself clinging too tightly to a role? The good one, the strong one, the wise one, the victim. Have you ever felt like you had to be that, even when your soul was asking to soften? We all carry archetypes, but we don't have to be carried away by them. True power, the kind that heals instead of harms, comes from integration, from knowing we can access the warrior and the lover, that we are both light and shadow, strength and tenderness. As Jung once said, the shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. So when you feel yourself slipping into a role, maybe as the one who must fix everything or the one who must always be right, pause, breathe, and ask, who am I beyond this role? What truth am I avoiding by clinging to this identity? Because the moment we loosen the grip, we return to ourselves, not as gods, not as heroes, not as saints, but as beautifully complex human beings, capable of love, of failure, of growth, and of humility. That humility is your anchor. It keeps you grounded, it keeps you human, and it protects you and everyone around you from the silent, dangerous pull of archetypal possession. Why you keep living the same pain and how to break the pattern. Have you ever wondered why the same painful situations keep happening in your life over and over again? Different people, different places, different timelines, but somehow the same story keeps unfolding. You fall for someone new, but end up feeling abandoned. Just like before, you switch job, but still feel unappreciated. You set boundaries, but attract the same kind of conflict. And each time, it feels like life is playing a cruel joke on you. But what if it's not life? What if it's you? Not the conscious you, not the you who journals, reflects, tries their best, but a deeper you, a part of your psyche that's still holding on to a wound and trying to make sense of it by repeating it. This is what Carl Jung, and later many psychoanalysts, called the repetition compulsion. It's the unconscious tendency to recreate familiar pain, not because we want to suffer, but because something inside us is still trying to resolve what was never healed. Let me be clear. This is not your fault. This is not about blame. This is about understanding. You see, when we go through a painful experience, especially in childhood, and we don't have the tools or support to process it, that energy doesn't disappear. It gets stored in the body, in the nervous system, in the unconscious mind. And because the psyche is always trying to seek resolution, we unconsciously look for situations that resemble the original wound, hoping this time maybe we'll get a different ending. But often, we don't. Because we're not conscious of the pattern yet. We're still acting it out, not observing it. Psychologist Christopher Bollas once called these experiences unthought knowns, memories so deep, so formative, that they never pass through our conscious awareness, but shape the way we see everything. It's like living inside a play we didn't write, rehearsing lines we didn't choose, playing a role we never agreed to, over and over again. And here's the heartbreaking part. This repetition doesn't just hurt us. It can also pull others in without them knowing it. Jung noticed this. He wrote that unresolved trauma has a way of creating psychic dramas in which we unconsciously assign roles to the people around us. The nurturing partner becomes the abandoning parent. The supportive friend becomes the betrayer. The mentor becomes the manipulator. And we don't do this to manipulate. We do this to survive, to finally finish a story that never got closure. But here's the twist. Every time we try to relive the story unconsciously, we rewound ourselves, and until we become aware of this pattern, we call it fate. We say, I just have bad luck. People always leave. No one really sees me. This always happens to me. Jung said it best. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And modern neuroscience backs this up. Traumatic experiences carve out literal neural pathways in the brain, pathways that become shortcuts for how we interpret the world. It's not just psychological, it's biological. Your brain starts expecting pain, abandonment, rejection, and unconsciously filters reality to confirm it. It's not because you're broken, it's because your nervous system got stuck in a loop. But here's the good news. That same brain that learns survival can learn healing. That same nervous system that stayed on high alert can be rewired. That same pattern that kept pulling you back into the past can be interrupted, but only when you recognize it. So how do you know if you're living out a repetition compulsion? Start by noticing your emotional déjà vu. What stories keep repeating themselves? What wounds seem to find you, no matter where you go? What kinds of people do you keep attracting? And most importantly, how do these patterns make you feel? Not on the surface, but deep down, because the repetition usually comes with a hidden belief. I deserve this. This is all I'll ever get. This is what love feels like. This is who I am. And once you find that belief, you've found the key, because now you can challenge it. You can pause the script. You can put down the role. You can say, I may have been cast as the victim, but I don't have to keep performing the pain. Healing begins when we stop repeating the trauma and start witnessing it, not to judge ourselves, but to understand. And when we bring that unconscious pattern into the light, we take away its power to control us. As Jung said, what we deny in ourselves does not disappear. It returns in darker forms. So today, let's stop denying. Let's begin to see. You are not your past. You are not the wound. You are not the pattern. You are the awareness that sees it all. The light behind the story. The consciousness that can choose again. So here's the invitation. Instead of asking, why does this always happen to me? Ask, what old story am I still acting out, hoping for a new ending? And then gently, bravely, compassionately begin to write a new one. Because you are not here to keep repeating pain. You are here to remember your power and reclaim your peace. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to be whole. Let me ask you something. What if healing isn't about becoming better, but becoming whole? What if the real journey isn't towards perfection, but towards reclaiming the parts of you you've spent years trying to avoid? Carl Jung once said, "I'd rather be whole than good." That one sentence carries the weight of everything we've been conditioned to misunderstand. You see, most of us spend our lives chasing an ideal version of ourselves. We try to be good, positive, spiritual, successful. We chase light, hoping that if we radiate enough of it, the darkness will disappear. But here's the truth. The darkness doesn't vanish when you ignore it. It grows, it hides. And eventually, it acts out, often in ways that surprise even us. That hidden part, that's what Jung called the shadow. The shadow isn't evil. It's not your enemy. It's simply the part of you that was once told, this isn't acceptable. Your anger, your jealousy, your sadness, your fears, even your brilliance, if it threatens someone else. So what did you do? You pushed it down. You covered it up. You became what the world wanted you to be at the cost of who you really are. But the shadow doesn't go away. It becomes the whisper in your relationships, the trigger in your arguments, the shame in your silence, the self-sabotage when things start going well. It's not here to destroy you. It's here to be seen. Because only when you acknowledge your shadow can you begin to integrate it. And that's where real healing begins. Not when you become perfect, but when you become real. Modern neuroscience confirms this too. Research by Dr. Daniel Siegel shows that when we bring awareness to previously dissociated emotions, when we name our feelings rather than suppress them, we literally create new neural pathways. Connections between our emotional centers and our prefrontal cortex, the home of reflection, empathy, self-awareness. In other words, consciousness rewires the brain. Wholeness is not just spiritual, it's physiological. So what does it look like when someone begins to integrate their shadow? It's subtle, but unmistakable. They stop judging people in black and white. They become more curious than reactive. They pause before labeling someone as bad or toxic. They see the gray and the complexity, the humanity in everyone, including themselves. They speak with honesty, not performance. They show up with humility, not ego. And when they mess up, because they will, they own it without collapsing into shame. They carry a quiet strength, not loud, not flashy, but steady, grounded, safe. That's the energy of integration. It doesn't shout, look how healed I am. It simply breathes, I'm okay being human. And that is magnetic, because deep down, we're all longing for that kind of presence. Someone who doesn't need you to be perfect to love you. Someone who doesn't need to be right to feel worthy. Someone who can sit with both the beauty and the brokenness and not flinch. Here's the beautiful paradox. The more you accept your shadow, the less power it has over you. The more you look at your flaws with compassion, the less they control your behavior. As Jungian analyst Robert Johnson wrote, what we deny in ourselves doesn't disappear. It just comes back in ways we can't control. So control isn't the answer. Consciousness is. You don't need to fix everything today. You don't need to be fully healed to be worthy. You just need to be willing to get honest, to get still, to listen to the parts of you that were silenced and let them speak. So here's my question for you. What part of yourself have you been afraid to face? And what would change if you held that part with love instead of shame? Because that's where integration begins. In the mirror, in the silence, in the moment you stop running from who you are and turn inward with compassion. This is not a path of saints. It's a path of humans, real, messy, magnificent humans, learning to walk with all their pieces instead of pretending they don't exist. And if you're on that path, even if you've just taken the first step, you're already healing. You're already becoming whole. So before you go, I want to leave you with this invitation. Don't chase the light. Become the container that can hold it, shadow and all. If this message resonated with you, don't just scroll away. Take a breath. Share this video. Leave a comment about what part of your shadow you're ready to face. And most importantly, keep walking. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to be whole, and the world is better because you're doing the work.